Hello, welcome to the podcast series of the Center for Irish Studies at Villanova University. My name is Joseph Lennon, Emily C. Riley, Director of the Center.
And I'm Jennifer Joyce, Associate Director and Curator of this series. We appreciate the support from our many donors, especially a generous grant from the Connolly Foundation.
This podcast series aims to reflect aspects of Irish studies through the 9 different academic disciplines that are taught through Villanova's Center for Irish Studies. Our faculty and students will engage in discussions with distinguished thinkers, artists, writers, academics, political leaders, and other campus visitors.
We are very excited for our second season of this podcast. Our episodes this year explore current issues about race and dive into traditional song and story. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are looking for more Irish Studies events, please join us virtually this year for a rich menu of programming. You can follow us on social media, find us at our website, or email us at irishstudies@villanova.edu. Hello, and welcome to the third episode of Season 2 of the Villanova Center for Irish Studies podcast series. And I'm Jennifer Joyce, Associate Director of the Center for Irish Studies at Villanova University. I'm pleased to introduce our guest, founder of Irish Studies and the Study Abroad program to Ireland at Villanova, Dr. Jim Murphy, who is Emeritus Director of Irish Studies now at Villanova. When I first thought about this podcast, Jim had read a beautiful story that he had written, a memoir, a memory from his childhood, his Irish-American childhood, at Christmas time. And this was at an event that we had hosted at the Kelly House, I believe last Christmas.
Okay.
And I was so mesmerized by the story and touched that I thought our listeners had to hear it. We had to spread this story. And so as we grow close to the holiday season, we've invited Jim back to Villanova to share his memoir with us. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Jim to tell us a little bit, maybe give us a little bit of an oral history as to the background of, how Irish Studies began at Villanova, and perhaps in the 40 years that we've now had Irish Studies at Villanova University, what are some highlights that you remember? What are some things that stand out? And maybe what have you seen that's changed? So welcome, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. I started at Villanova in 1963 and retired just 10 years ago. But from the beginning, I had an interest in Irish literature, although in those days, all Irish literature was under the auspices of an English department. And if you studied any course that you were going to read, maybe James Joyce, you were doing it in an English fiction course. And it just struck me and others in the field that there was enough material that was distinctly Irish to show be on its own. And we were lucky at Villanova to have a good collection of books in the library, a lot of it because of the Augustinian connection of Irish priests over the years. So there was a building block in the library. We had people in the history department who liked Irish history and were anxious to teach it. We had Mick Maloney living in Philadelphia at the time, a great folklorist, and did Irish music. So we had the building blocks to do an interdisciplinary program, which was getting kind of hot academically at the time anyway. Irish studies, American studies, women's studies, global studies, these kinds of programs that were separating themselves from traditional single discipline majors to become interdisciplinary. Mm-hmm. And Ireland and its complicated history, its culture, its achievements in literature lent itself to that. So in 1979, we launched it. And a few years later, we launched an affiliation with University College Galway, now called National University of Ireland in Galway. And I leaped on that right away, partly because my family background was from the west of Ireland, my mom and dad, but also because there was already a thriving study abroad American setup in Dublin. And that's all well and good, but it struck me that Galway gave students a better capital Irish experience. They could ride bikes, they could get easy access to pubs, they could stay with families instead of in apartment buildings in a busy place like Dublin. They didn't have to commute on buses. So it just seemed a more intimate Irish experience. As you know, Jennifer, you could go on your bike and be out along the seacoast. You could be an hour, you could be in Connemara. So in Dublin, you go an hour, you're still kind of in Dublin. You're in the suburbs. So I thought Galway would work well, and it has worked well over the years, and it's been a big success. Now we have programs in Galway and in Dublin, which you know, internships. So I guess I have to say it's grown by leaps and bounds, and it's in good hands now with you and Joe Lennon. So I'm quite happy and proud about the Irish Studies.
As you should be. And we are so quite happy and proud of you and all that you laid the foundation for. And, I know personally for me, Galway is a special place as well. And I had the privilege of staying in your home there and falling in love with it, just as you and your wife, Kathy, have as well. So I know.
We had a home there for 25 years. Only recently got rid of it. But so we had a really long and intimate experience with Galway and the west of Ireland. Yeah.
And I know you developed some really pretty special relationships with some of the writers over the years as well. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
Very fortunate in that respect to meet some of the best, greatest of Irish writers, who are among the greatest writers in the English language. When you think people like Seamus Heaney, who was a friend of ours. And then in 2000, I guess it was, the Heimbold Chair was started at Villanova through a generous donation from Charlie Heimbold, Villanova alum. That was an interesting story, too, because Charlie was the CEO of Bristol Myers. So the thinking, I think, in the alumni department was, well, this fellow might be interested in making a big gift, and it would probably be to the science program or maybe business or finance, something like that. It turns out he was an English major as an undergraduate, and he had liked Yeats. And he was looking through the catalog, and he saw Irish Studies. He says, what's this all about? And that led him to say, well, that's, I think, a good place for me to make a donation. So he gave us a very generous donation that allows for an Irish writer to be in residence for the spring semester of each year. And that's been going now for, 22
over
years?
20 years.
Over 20 years. So and that's a pretty well-known program in Ireland, in the writing community. So partly with the help early on of people like Seamus Heaney, who encouraged other writers to take advantage of this opportunity, we've been able to get some of the best.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Fiction writers, poets, dramatists, journalists.
It's certainly a highlight of my job for sure. Rubbing elbows.
Yeah, you really get to know these
learning,
people, and they teach 2 courses, usually small undergraduate courses. So they're in intimate learning environments with students. And they form friendships. It's great. It's great. A lot of them come with it depends on the person, but a lot of them come with children, families. The kids go to school here. They get immersed in Villanova and Philadelphia and the American culture, and it's just really good.
Yeah, and as you talk about the students, I'm also thinking about, for these last 40 years, all of the students that you've not only taught Irish literature to, but went abroad to Galway and took students. And hopefully some alums out there are listening in and are reminded of their wonderful times with good old Dr. Murphy, because I know some of my friends who are alums went on those trips as well, and then all of the students who benefited from these Heimbold Chair visits. And so it's just got to be so wonderful looking back and knowing that these efforts of yours are continuing to bring so much joy and life into.
I still get emails from students who remembered bicycling together on the Aran Islands and all that.
Beautiful.
It's one of the reasons I had to retire, actually, is because we go to the Aran Islands and bike, 4 or 5 miles a day, which was wonderful. But every year the students were 19, and every year I got older.
And I hear you have a big birthday coming up.
I do, a big one. Ends in 0, 80.
80 this Friday.
Friday the
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Friday the 13th.
Yeah, well, we're going to ask you to maybe take a trip down memory lane all those years ago and tell us a little bit about your upbringing and,
Okay,
your parents and kind of give us an intro into this lead for the story and then maybe just head into reading it for us.
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
Well, my parents both came from Ireland, from the West. They came independent of each other and met each other in New York at an Irish dance hall and got married and raised us. We started out in an apartment building in Brooklyn, New York, where I lived till I was in my 20s. My mom was from Mayo. My dad was from Leitrim. And my mom especially was devoted to Ireland and Irish music. My dad didn't say that much about it, but my mom was always crying. I think it's partly because she was the only one of 8 who came over from Ireland. So she was kind of more alone, My dad was the 5th of 13 children. But of those 13, 11 of them came to America, and most of them were in the New York area. So he had a network of people around him that could, help him deal with the loss. But when I was growing up, I never met my grandparents. All I saw was faded black and white photographs of them. Now, since I've been back so many times over the years, I've got lots and lots of first cousins. More over there than over here, really, that I see. In fact, I just got some emails from them regarding the election.
Oh, that's neat. Ireland celebrated, I think, with this Irish-American president-elect.
Big time. Because one cousin they asked me if I knew that Joe Biden's roots were in Mayo.
Ballina.
Ballina, County Mayo. Well, we have a program, don't we, in Ballina?
Yeah, the Jackie Clark Museum internship program.
Yeah, see, that's an example of the way the Irish Studies program has grown since I left it. So we're all over the place now over there. And this memoir I wrote it actually, I wrote a big long memoir, which never quite got published, but little bits and pieces of it have gotten published here and there. And it's out of those bits and pieces that I developed this story, Christmas memoir, that I wanted to share with my grandchildren, actually, so they would have some sense of it. Then it was since published in Irish America magazine. Some of your listeners may know that magazine. I called it A Child's Christmas in Brooklyn. And I got that title because one of my favorite Christmas stories is Dylan Thomas's story, A Child's Christmas in Wales. And I loved the way he evoked what Christmas was like in a Welsh village. And I thought, well, can I do something of the same for a Brooklyn apartment building, which would be a long way from a Welsh village, but nonetheless, Christmas is Christmas. So that's why I wrote that. Shall I read it for you?
I would love that, and we would love it. Yes, please.
Okay, probably about 15-minute read, I think. Let's see. A Child's Christmas in Brooklyn. In the Brooklyn world of my childhood, Ireland seemed especially close when Christmas was in the air. At Christmas, we kids may have been all caught up and looking forward to Santa, but Mom and Dad, each in their own way, were looking back to Ireland. Cards would begin to arrive from Ireland, and Mom especially would cherish each and every one, waiting anxiously for the ones from her 2 sisters, my Aunt Una and Aunt Joan, because these 2 cards would also contain letters for her to linger over, her eyes growing all teary, as was her way. Both of my parents left home in the 20s, Mom at age 16 from Ballyhonus, County Mayo, and Dad at 21 from Clune, County Leitrim. They had met in an Irish dance hall, courted, married, worked and worked and worked again to keep our family of 5 afloat. Only now, too many years later, do I realize how the Christmas season must have reminded each of them of the great distance that separated them from home. My mom and dad are both long gone now, but each year at Christmas, I begin to hear their voices again. They seem to be in the air for me at this time of year. One Christmas was so much like another in those years that they now all blur into one big ball of holidays. Let me pick one sometime in the late 1940s. Our apartment on Newkirk Avenue comes alive with expectation because today we will bring home our tree, sure to be a fine big tree because each year Dad helps Paddy Power sell trees outside St. Jerome's Church on Nostrand Avenue. A prime location, that's the key, Dad says. The subway and church right there, so there's lots of traffic. Sunday is the big day for tree sales because, as Dad says, you get them coming after Mass when they're feeling good about things. And they know you're one of their own since you're there at the church. And they recognize Paddy since he's an usher all the time. Sure, you couldn't keep that man out of church. So naturally, Paddy gets the business instead of some huckster who might not even be a Christian. There's no flies on Paddy Power, that's for sure. He knows where his bread gets buttered, and fair play to him. He's there all year with the ushering. So why shouldn't he pick up a few dollars when the time comes? I must say, selling trees to a crowd spilling out of church is easy pickings, as your man would say. On the Sundays after Mass, leading up to Christmas, the streets are alive with trees moving in all directions. Sometimes a father throws one up on his shoulder and marches away. Maybe he hugs the trunk of a bigger one, his kids grabbing the other end, and off they'd go. Lots of people from apartment buildings like ours have a tree so small they could tuck it under their arms and carry it home. But Dad doesn't approve of those trees. Dwarfs, he says, a poor excuse for a tree. You might as well bring home a twig or a stalk of celery. For us, this year's tree is so big, it has to come home by car. Paddy Power and Dad have roped it up tight and tied it onto the roof of our old 1938 Plymouth. I'm allowed to stand in the rumble seat and be sure it doesn't move. Jimmy, hold tight to the seat. If the tree starts to move, give me a shout. And off we go, and I'm like a fireman on a hook and ladder or the lucky trash man hanging on the back of his truck. I cling to the seat with one hand and to the tree with the other, but I'm able to give a quick wave to anyone who stops to see us go by. You okay back there, cowboy? Shouts Dad. I'm great. When we get home, Mom and Joan have to come down to help us lug the tree up the flight of stairs to our place, apartment 2A. Mom wonders, Joe, that's an enormous tree, my God. Where in the name of God will we fit such a tree? Have you gone mad? Joe, take any tree. That's what Paddy Power said to me. So I say he was a shocked man to see the one we took. Isn't that right, Jimmy? It's one he could have sold to a bishop. But it's here now, all ours. Take any tree you want, Joe. And so I took him at his word. And we huffed and puffed our way up the stairs, Joan and I as happy as Larry to have such a tree. In the days leading up to Christmas, the apartment building becomes a forest of evergreen. As people lean their trees on the walls outside their doors, there's no tree by a door. It must be the apartment of one of the Jewish families, or maybe a widow, one of the atheists we hear about and pray for in school. Or maybe a Scrooge like Mr. Madden who lives in 3B and on rainy days is always telling us kids not to play in the hallways. Now the ceilings in our apartment were high, so our tree was always tall and wide, filling the room. But this year's tree seems bigger than ever. Dad even has to nail down the tree stand so it won't topple over. This makes Mom worry about the banging and the holes in the floor, but Dad says not to bother, because the rug will be put back down after Christmas, and who'll be the wiser? Joe Murphy, you're mad about Christmas trees each and every year. Next year you'll be drilling a hole in the ceiling. Dad just laughs. A good idea, Kathleen. Maybe 2A and 3A can share a tree. We'll just send it on up through the floor to them. We'll be like Rockefeller Center. What do you say to that? We all have to think of the Hercombs up in 3A watching a tree poke up into their living room. And even up again to the Cullens in 4A. And then like Jack's beanstalk, up through the roof and into the sky. You know, Kathleen, he says, at home in Leitrim we didn't have a tree at all. We hung some holly around the place, candles in the windows, but no tree. No room for one in the house. 15 of us in that small house. Can you imagine? Where in the name of God will we ever put a tree? So we settled for the holly and the ivy all over the place, just like in the tune. He winks at us. No tree, but you know what, Jimmy and Joni? Santa always found us every year. At least we had a chimney for him. No chimney here in this apartment, but by God, we'll have a mighty tree for Santa when he comes. He cuts a foot or more from the bottom and again from the top. Together we manage it into the tree stand, and it stands there all tied up, waiting for Dad to cut the ropes. When he does, the branches spread like wings to nearly fill the living room. I remember us all staring at it in wonder, Mom saying, Joe, that's an enormous tree, my God. And us kids thrilled to have such a tree. A redwood couldn't match it, he says with a big smile, proud as a peacock. And we begin what I see now as a sort of ritual. On the Victrola, our cherished Bing Crosby Merry Christmas album sets the tone. There are the 5 of us, and the album has 5 78 RPM records. So we take turns from oldest to youngest and stack up our choices on the turntable. Dad picks Silent Night, and Mom takes I'll Be Home for Christmas. I go for Santa Claus is Coming to Town instead of Jingle Bells. And my sister Joni takes White Christmas, leaving my baby sister Eileen, who doesn't know any tunes at all, with the only one left, God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Joan says it isn't fair, but Dad tells her that in the next round we'll go youngest to oldest and she'll be first, which means she can take Jingle Bells. This consoles her, and Dad says, let the concert begin, and we let Silent Night fill the room as the tree awaits us. First, my baby sister Eileen is held up, and we pretend she puts the star at the top of the tree. Then Dad and I begin with the lights, each of us on a chair, since the tree is so high. Then we slowly work our way down, all the time reaching around the tree as best we can and passing the string of lights from one hand to another. He reaching all through the wide branches to me, with my fingers stretching for his. And then I feel his hand grab the lights and string them on my side, until I come around, me reaching out now for his fingers on the other side of the tree. Behind us, Mom and Joan unpack the ornaments, waiting for Dad and me to signal that we're done and they can begin. Mom has 2 special ornaments, both from Ireland, and they are given pride of place near the top of the tree. A crocheted star and a little cottage, whose paint has chipped and dulled over the years and whose chimney is missing. Once she has these placed on the tree, Joni and I are free to add all the other ornaments and school cutouts wherever we wish. When we're done and everyone agrees on what should go where, comes the finishing touch, the tinsel. We hang a few tangled strands here and there on our own, but then we give way to Dad, as if by some unspoken signal or inner recognition that we don't quite measure up when it comes to hanging tinsel. It's a special gift, and Dad alone of us has it. His quiet patience, his silent introspection, humming as he works. Take your pick, Paddy Power had said, and Dad had taken him at his word. So it was his tree. We all do our part to decorate it, but at heart, it is his tree. He is like a priest approaching it, and he may spend hours at it, a strand of tinsel at a time, absorbed in it as we all go off to whatever else cores us. But he stays there, stepping back and looking at his work, correcting some of the chaos we've created in our clumsy tinsel efforts, a man at quiet peace with himself. By now we have heard all of Bing Crosby's Christmas songs at least twice, so our Irish records start to make their way onto the turntable, especially anyone with a Christmas theme. Because he works for Hostess Cakes, and at Christmas he sells fruitcakes to one and all, Dad's favorite is the McNulty family album singing Miss Fogarty's Christmas Cake. Give us the Murphy family version, says Dad, and we all sing along with the McNulty family, waiting to change the last lines. There were plums and prunes and cherries, there were citrons and raisins and cinnamon too, there was nutmeg, cloves and berries, and a crust that was nailed down with glue. There were caraway seeds in abundance that would work up a fine tummy ache, or would kill a man twice after eating a slice of a Hostess Christmas cake. Mom's favorite is Christmas in Killarney, which, like I'll Be Home for Christmas, makes her eyes fill. At home in Mayo, she tells us it's God's truth what that song says. The door is always open, the neighbors pay a call. Joni and I like best when the song says, and Santa Claus, you know, of course, is one of the boys from home. But Dad says Santa's not a Mayo man at all. He's a likable, lovable Leitrim lad like myself. When we have everything ready for the lighting, we place our manger at the base of the tree. We have Mary and Joseph, but no baby Jesus, because that's Santa's job when he comes on Christmas Eve. We have 2 shepherds, but only 2 wise men. Dad said the third must have followed the wrong star. He's like your Uncle Frank. Last come the animals. There's a camel, a cow, and 2 sheep, all of them lying down. Mom says that's because at home, all the animals in all the fields would lie down on Christmas Eve to wait for the baby Jesus. We have no fields or animals on Newkirk Avenue, so I picture the animals in Prospect Park Zoo. Come Christmas Eve, surely the lions and tigers, the elephants and rhinos will all be lying down for the baby Jesus. On the camel's back, I sit one of my cowboys swinging a lasso. When the stage is all set, Dad says, "Ready now. Close your eyes and count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and we open. The tree fills the room with light, a waterfall of tinsel, and behind all his silver glow our lights and all the glistening ornaments. It is our Christmas tree of dreams." Thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you all.
That was beautiful, Jim. Thank you so much. And I know that that will really resonate so much with the memories of many of our audience members.
I would think
the
so,
Irish
yeah.
tradition.
And other ethnic traditions have their own thing, but when you're a kid, you don't realize how much they're going to stick with you.
Yeah, well, that was
And
beautiful.
they all come back at Christmas, you know.
And so
unfortunately, this Christmas we have this darn virus.
Right, right. So maybe the holidays are even more of a focus of coming together the best we can, of being grateful as we approach Thanksgiving for all of our blessings, and then heading into this.
Yeah, because we probably won't be
Christmas
getting
season.
together with as many people as we would like to. But that's probably the way it was for my parents when they would be forced to think back to their parents.
Sure.
Across the ocean. Of course, that didn't dawn on us. We were so busy waiting for Christmas toys. We didn't think about what it must have been like for people at home. Imagine my grandmother, especially on my father's side. Imagine her and my grandfather to see 11 of 13 children go out the door. 11 of 13.
And the holidays must have been particularly difficult.
Yeah,
then.
you would think so, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that now your grandchildren have this
That's
story.
why I gave them the book, so they could have it.
A slice of your family's, memories.
Yeah, and for them, it's got a few pictures of us as kids, so they like that too. So.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today and being our guest. It's great, as always, to see you. We wish you
good luck with the Irish Studies program going forward.
Thank you, and very happy birthday.
Thank you.